So then here, the horse looks more willing to do its job. She holds the ground better. She has a better lengthening of stride. Savannah has a lot of motion through her hips, but her core is engaged enough to see how her upper body is not shifting around a whole lot. She's strong, she's stable, she has good connection to her horse. It looks good. Welcome to the Elevate Your Ride podcast, where rider performance is taken to the next level through conversation and education. Our episodes range from rider health to horse training to the stories behind successful amateurs and more. I'm your host, Ellie, personal trainer for equestrians. Thanks for tuning in. A quick testimonial from one of our listeners. Jeff said, "Great podcast. Well done. I can't imagine being into riding horses and not giving these a listen. Can't wait to see where you're going next. Great work." Thank you, Jeff, for listening. Okay, welcome back to another episode of Elevate Your Ride. I'm your host, Ellie, and then I have my trainer with me today, Savannah McGuire of Ambition Performance Horses. And then we have our lovely model, Miss Rosie. And we're going to be talking today about our muscles and their jobs and how they impact you when you ride. So if you're tight in certain areas or weak in certain areas, how that impacts your body, how that impacts your horse, how that impacts your ability to take cues from your trainer. We're going to be talking about the importance of body position and when it's important to be strong for your horse, but when it's also important to be loose and mobile for your horse, because there's somewhere in the middle. It can't just be super far either direction. So yeah, that's what we're going to do today. So first we'll talk a little bit about body position and why it's important. So why does body position matter? Why do we care about it?
Body positioning is a core fundamental in horsemanship, and it is what allows us to communicate effectively with our equine partners. Some horses are more dependent on your positioning than others, and your flexibility or tightness depending on the individual. But understanding how your riding affects your horse and how to get the very best performance out of your animal and as a partnership is imperative to ensuring success.
What happens when a rider gets too tight on their horse, trying to stay in a super strong position?
The biggest fault that I see when people get too tight on their horse is that they don't understand that tension radiates to the animal and is equivalent to mashing on the gas pedal while simultaneously having the parking brake engaged. So while everything in your legs and your hands is saying go, if your seat is not following, your animal's not going to be as fluid as rhythmic as it is capable of being.
How important is it to have mobile hips when you ride a horse?
Having softness in your hips is probably one of the greatest assets that really differentiates your excellent riders from your learning riders. It's not creating motion where there isn't motion, but it's also allowing for the motion that the animal has that is so vital to good rhythm and balance on a horse.
Can you give us an example of what riding with loose hips looks like versus tight hips on a horse that cares a lot about your hips?
Yes, this horse is a great horse to demonstrate on. If you carry tension in your hips, she just is not going to give you the length of stride that she is capable of. So here you can see this horse is able to take a nice full stride, pretty even back and front, able to balance through its top line. Now if I was to tighten my hips, you'll start to see her change. So right now if you focus on my hips, they're not creating movement where there isn't movement, but they're just following the motion of the horse and allowing that shot. If I start to sit tighter like I would in horsemanship, this horse will literally quit. If I try to find something in the middle where I'm tight, and maybe a little tip top line, you're going to watch her length of stride change significantly. Simply because I'm not allowing for the motion. Because she's a good girl, she'll keep going if I ask it of her. But we're going to lose her quality of movement. I'm going to nice it up. Allow for that movement. Turn my feet again. You'll watch her stride length change. And her top line gets stronger again.
I think you're too good. I didn't see a huge difference between the two of them. Like, there was a difference, but like, can you get her to throw her neck upside down like she does with the rest of us?
Okay, let's try for practice.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah. So you can see there how Savannah's not moving her hips near as much, and she's staying really stable. And see how then she gets a lot of movement through her upper body, and it gets really stiff, and it looks like she's very rigid. Yeah, she's very, and then the mare quits. And then what might somebody do with their leg in that instance to try to make up for their seat not doing its job?
Typically, riders who get tight in their hips will also curl up through their lower leg, but then they'll get more demanding with their foot. Poor mare's like so confused. They'll get more demanding with their foot because they are trying to find that balance point and keep the horse going. A lot of times, when you don't have mobility through your seat, you're going to find that you think the answer is always more leg. Always more leg, more pressure, more tension through your leg because you're trying to get that horse to stay forward regardless of your mobility.
Okay, so we wanted to start with the hips a little bit to show you what it can look like when your body is not properly moving with your horse. So we're actually going to move on to the lower leg. If you didn't listen and watch the first episode that I did about our muscles and their jobs and how to strengthen and how to lengthen different muscles, maybe go watch that first and then come back and watch this one. But if I look at the lower leg of the rider, and typically, like if we're talking about the equitation classes, so the horsemanship or the English hack, then we want strength through the front of the shin to lift our toes up, and then we want flexibility in the back of the calf to allow for that heel to push down. So if you have a hard time pushing your heels down and you're tired of your trainer always yelling at you about it, it could be because maybe you're just not activating through here enough and lengthening through here enough. It could be because you don't actually have that strength and that mobility through your lower leg. But the problem could also be up higher. It could be through your hips, but I would start with the lower leg and see if strengthening this and stretching this makes a difference. So you ride around and demonstrate what it looks like when you're too relaxed through here, when you're too tight through here, and when it's maybe just right through here for like a horsemanship or anything. So Savannah's going to demonstrate what it looks like when we're too tight and how that can impact our horse and the horse's movements. So what I see, because I know this horse and I know Savannah, if she gets too tight through the lower leg, then she's not going to be able to absorb the horse's motion through her feet well. And the horse is not going to be as willing to go forward. They're not going to want to lift up their back to the seat of the rider quite as much. And then if you're too loose, then your heel is going to bounce around too much, and we don't want that as much for when we're actually showing. So then here you could say that she's maybe a little too loose because her lower leg is moving around a lot more. There's just a lot of movement. Probably better for just riding around, but if you're trying to go to a horse show, then you would want to activate the front of the shin, lengthen that heel down, and really, really get a good stretch through there. So let's see. How low can you get your heels down, trainer Savannah? Yeah, there. So you might notice that she does get a little tighter through her leg and her seat when she pushes her heel down. So that is something to be aware of. Maybe it's not something you want to practice all the time, but just when you're getting ready to go show. All right. Do you have anything that you want to say about that?
Other common faults we see is people are trying to figure out where for their feet and their ankles is that when they think about dropping their ankles, they're thinking about pushing on their stirrups and pushing down on their stirrups. And when we tend to push down, if we don't have the strength and the connection through our body, then what we're going to see is that we're pushing our feet forward in an attempt to keep that animal going, in an attempt to keep our heels down. When you think about lengthening your legs and pushing down into your heels, I just really encourage you to think about lengthening your legs and pushing down, and not thinking about actively pushing on the stirrups as much as you're thinking about lengthening your entire leg.
Are you always hearing, roll your shoulders back, push your heels down, add more leg, but you don't feel like you can? These cues will feel like a constant fight if your mind and body has not developed the proper connection, coordination, mobility, stability, and strength required. At Lope Down the Rail Fitness, I create customized workout plans for riders so you can become a stronger athlete for your horse. If you're ready to ride more effectively, visit my website, lopeanddowntherailfitness.com, linked in the show notes of this episode, and start training with purpose to elevate your ride. Okay, we're going to move up to talk about the upper thigh, okay? So for our thigh muscles, we have the quad on the front side and the hamstring on the back side. So the quad muscle is responsible for straightening the leg, and then the hamstring is responsible for bending at the knee. So when you see riders who are kicking their lower leg too far out in front of them and riding like the skiers, then we're having too much quad activation and not enough hamstring activation. So I'd want to engage those hamstring muscles to bend the knee more and bring that lower leg back underneath us. But then in the opposite, if we're getting too much hamstring engagement, so then if our leg is too far back, we're going to need a little bit more quad activation. So first, Savannah will show too much quad, where the lower leg is going to be too far out in front of her. Can you explain why that's not an effective position for riding?
When your quads tend to come forward, your hip flexors shorten and it pulls your pelvis into a forward tilt. All of those things don't allow for mobility through your seat.
So then when we have too much hamstring engagement, the leg is going to be pulled too far back, specifically the lower leg. So how does that impact when you go to ride?
For a lot of riders, that's also going to maintain the forward tilt in their pelvis because they become more like a teeter-totter. And the further back that they pull their leg, the tighter their hip flexors get pulling them forward.
So if you're,
being able to think about being long and being around the horse is going to help mitigate a lot of those and help you find that balance.
Yeah, so if you...
about having a neutral pelvis and letting your legs hang straight down from your shoulder. Now, if this horse magically disappeared, the goal is that we could land on our feet. The balance between our hips, our shoulders, and our feet is such that if she just went away, I would come straight down.
Next, we're going to move on to the hips, okay? So we have the front side of the hips, which are the hip flexors. We have the back side, which are the glutes. We have the outsides, which are the outer thighs and the outer glutes. And then we have the insides, which is the inner thigh. So riding is a little bit of an interesting position for our hips because we are trying to get all of those muscles to activate at the same time. So as you're sitting here, my hip flexors are engaged to hold my leg bent and keep my hips bent, okay? But then my glutes are working to keep my pelvis tucked in. So if my hip flexors aren't engaged enough, my leg is going to be too straight and I'm not going to have enough hip bend. And then it's going to feel really hard to connect to your horse through your seat if you don't have enough bend for your hips. And then if you don't have enough glute engagement, you're going to have the duck butt, which nobody wants. Again, your horse is not going to be willing to lift up and connect to your seat if you have the duck butt. And then we have the inner thighs, which are responsible for both bringing our legs closer to our horse and internally rotating our leg. So if your trainer is constantly telling you that your leg is too open, like this position, then you're probably going to need a little bit more inner thigh engagement to close your leg on your horse. But I would say that a lot of our all-around trainers and riders are actually trending towards more externally rotating hips. So using the outer thighs and the outer glutes to open our leg up. It's just allowing us to have more connection to the horse in the back of the leg and through our lower leg and spur. And it makes it easier that way when you go to have corrections for your horse, your leg is already right in the position it needs to be in. You don't have to move your leg around to connect to your horse. So you want to use these outer thighs and outer glute muscles to open up your leg and hold it strong. So you want to have this engaged enough to keep your hip open, but then you have to have the inner thigh engaged enough to keep the knee closed. Because what we don't want is a lot of knee flopping in and out. We want a strong leg with our hips open at the same time. So let's demonstrate the inner thighs and the outer thighs and the outer glutes first to show what it looks like when it's too tight through here, so we're clamped onto the thighs, or too tight through here where our knees are just super tight. So first we're going to show where it's too tight. So we have too much inner thigh engagement that's closing our hips. Can you talk about how that's impacting your horse?
So I find that when I override with the inside and keep my knees pinched to the animal, it's pulling my calves away from the horse. And in order to keep this motion on this horse, I'm having to factor every stride in order to be able to maintain forward motion, which is not ideal when we're talking about a quiet, effective horsemanship rider or equitation rider.
So then when we have too much outer thigh, outer glute engagement, we're opening up too much and our knees are too open. Can you talk about how that feels different and why that's not good either?
So a lot of times when we ride too open, it takes the motion that was down at the calf and it brings it up into the thigh. And so now, instead of seeing my leg bounce on every step, we're watching my knees fade in and out. It sometimes looks very similar, but when you can identify that it's happening at the knee versus at the hip, it is giving the horse a completely different sense. So,
Okay, and what about just right?
just right. We're going to feel the tension in our glute sleeves. We're going to feel our ability to absorb that motion. We're going to be able to get quieter through our legs, and our horse is going to respond with an easier extension of the gait.
So what I see when your hips are better, one, you are quieter through your seat, quieter through your leg, and your horse is more willing to go forward. That, I think, is pretty easy to see through here. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the hip flexors and the glutes. Okay, so the hip flexors are responsible for getting more crease in your pants, bringing your knee up higher. Okay, so when we have too much hip flexor engagement, then we're going to get more of the chair seat, which is super, super common for riders who are maybe more novice, maybe learning this discipline. And then you can see that we're too tight through here. We're also too weak in our glutes, and we tend to get more of a pelvic tilt and a lower back arch. So our horse is not going to want to round up and connect to us when we're in this position. We're going to not have very good shock absorption through our seat, and the horse is going to feel that through their back and not want to lift up to you. So then we have the glutes. So the glutes are going to help pull this leg back behind you. So the glutes are responsible for pulling back, okay? So then the opposite, if you have too much glute engagement and it pulls your whole leg too far back, it's likely going to tip you forward in your seat, and you're not going to be able to connect well through your horse, and you're probably going to have your knee too far away. It's going to be hard to engage this inner thigh to then connect to your horse. So you can see when we have the chair seat that I would say that her lower leg looks stable, maybe a little tight on her horse, but her hips are very tight and the mare is not as willing to move forward, and it just does not put her legs in an effective position to wrap around. Can you get more? More chair seat. Yeah, more. See how that mare just quits? She's like, what is going on with my rider today? So then see how we get kind of that rigidity through the upper body again? It's not ideal. All right, now let's do too much glutes. So legs pulling you too far back. So again, we're getting a lot of that. She does not like that. So you can see how she wants to flip her neck up. She doesn't want to go forward. She doesn't want to connect to Savannah. I would say her lower leg is really stable, but then see how the knees are too far away. It's hard to engage the inner thighs. It's too much, okay? Now just right. Rosie's like, thank God. Okay, so then when Savannah pulls herself into more of an effective position, that mare immediately wants to connect back to her and find her rhythm again.
I mean, you can see for sure when you were riding in the wrong position, and then you obtain the correct position. The horse then wants to ask questions about where should I be and how soft should I be to the egg. Like when you guys watch me go from this and disconnected to back to wanting to connect, she was like, do I have to get off your leg? Yes, you have to get off my leg. But I had left it there so long that she had allowed herself to just get heavy to it and allowed it to support her instead of her having her own self-carry.
And then it would be common for the rider to then want to over-spur over lower leg to try to kick the horse forward.
Correct.
Yeah. I wonder who does that.
Can Maggie. Ellie would never.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the upper body, okay? So for our torso, we have our abdominal muscles, and then we have our back muscles, okay? Our abs are responsible for giving us a lot of stability through our upper body in the saddle. So if you don't have enough ab engagement, it's going to be really hard, especially at the extended gaits, to have fluid motion through your horse. So in a minute, we're going to show the difference between having too stiff of abs that's not allowing you to connect then through your leg, through your seat, and then your upper body's going to get really rigid, okay? So the other thing that the abs do is they pull you forward, okay? So if you have a rider that sits too far back in the saddle and leans back too much, their back muscles are pulling them back here, and the abs are not engaged enough to pull them back forward, okay? So if you're leaning too far back and you're not connecting enough to your horse through your entire body, but especially for your seat, you need more ab engagement, right? And then the opposite, if you're leaning too far forward, the back muscles and the glutes are responsible for standing you back up. So if you're leaning too far forward, you need more back muscles to pull you back. So when the abs are too engaged and they're pulling forward too much, even more, pull forward more. Okay, see how much Savannah bounces through her seat and how her horse is like, I don't know about that, okay? And then the opposite, if Savannah leans too far back, so has too much too much back engagement, again, same thing. I would say she's quieter through her leg, but her upper body moves a lot more. And what does it feel like when you're leaning too far back?
I feel like a jackhammer.
Yes.
I feel like I'm just putting all of my weight in my seat bone and my shoulders up into her loin, which is going to make it really hard for her to offer us a true extension. So often when you see riders doing this, you're going to see a horse that goes quicker, but does not show an extended length of stride.
Okay, what about when the abs are pulling you too far forward? What do you feel?
When they're too far forward, a lot of times we'll see the abs pull too far forward, and then we'll see riders trying to pull their shoulders back because they're being told, sit back, sit back. And unless they address it from the seat, they're going to end up having what we phrase as the duck butt. And while they're going to be tall, they're going to be a very bouncy looking rider.
Maybe at the extended lope, show when you're not connected through your core and when you are connected through your core, and talk about the difference.
Okay, so rider too far forward, upper back, up the shoulders, putting back.
See how the mare doesn't want to hold the ground very much.
A lot of movement. And the rider's up the path. Too far back.
okay? And then show just right and good core engagement. So then here, the horse looks more willing to do its job. She holds the ground better. She has a better lengthening of stride. Savannah has a lot of motion through her hips, but her core is engaged enough to see how her upper body is not shifting around a whole lot. She's strong, she's stable, she has good connection to her horse. It looks good. Are you loving our content and are wondering how you can support your hosts? Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify for access to all our episodes ad-free. For $4.99 a month, you can help us bring you the quality content you need to elevate your ride. If you're interested in sponsoring an episode for your business, our packages start at $25 an episode and offer you a wide range of exposure to equestrians. Click the Sponsor Us link in the show notes to learn more. Are you ready to take your riding to the next level? Better performance starts with a mindset shift. How you think, train, and show up each day. Positive affirmations like small steps toward big goals, progress over perfection, and consistency builds confidence serve as powerful reminders to stay focused and committed. Check out our Elevate Your Ride affirmation merch, linked in the show notes, and add intention to your everyday routine. Okay, next we're going to move even higher and talk about the shoulders, okay? I feel like the shoulders are a point of tension between a lot of trainers and their amateurs. So a lot of us have desk jobs or just poor posture in our daily lives. So we tend to get an upper rounded forward spine and then rounded forward shoulders, okay? So if you're living your daily life like this, it's going to be really hard when you go to the barn and you try to lengthen your spine and pull your shoulders back to hold that strong horsemanship position. And you're constantly going to hear your trainer yell at you to pull your shoulders back, okay? So what happens if you have too much rounding of the spine, too much rounding of the shoulders, and then you try to just jam those shoulders back, is it's going to arch your back and pull your head and neck forward, okay? That is not what we're looking for, and it's going to create a lot of tension through the body, and it's going to make it really hard to have your core properly engaged and get your horse to connect to your seat. So we want our upper back muscles to fold our spine in a lengthened position, but we want to be soft. We don't want to be so stiff that we can't then move the rest of our body. So we want to feel the ab and the back muscles lengthening our spine. We want to feel our upper back and the backs of our shoulders, bringing our shoulders into an externally rotated position. So we have internal rotation where the shoulders are too far forward, and then external rotation where the shoulders are too far back. We want to find somewhere in the middle, but leaning more towards a little bit of external rotation. So when your trainer tells you to bring your shoulders back, they're not really asking for this, where you're actually pulling back so far that you're arching your back. They're actually asking you to externally rotate and through the shoulders and lengthen the spine. That's really what they need. They're not asking for this, okay? They're asking for this, okay? So something that is really easy to do when you're riding is to do an external rotation of the shoulders. So if you feel like you're rounding too far forward and your trainer's yelling at you too much, you just need to open up your shoulders, open up your hands, and then close them back to your horsemanship position, and that will bring your shoulders where they need to be.
And I think as a trainer, it's so important that you guys are asking questions regularly if you're unclear about what it is your horse trainer is after. So oftentimes when we say shoulders back, you may need to clarify. Does that mean I need to draw my shoulders physically, both, everything about my upper body back over my hips, or does that mean that I need to externally rotate my shoulders and create a little bit softer line? It is very common if you have a really good seat and really good lower leg that this is going to be your struggle point, because the same softness and mobility in your core and your hips here that is such an asset for your force and your connection is going to be the same thing that it's going to make difficult to be a little bit tighter and a little bit prettier and a little bit more externally rotated up here. So it's definitely something to clarify with your coach. When they say shoulders back, are you talking about I need to lean back more? and adjust my pelvis, or do I actually need to externally rotate my shoulders and kind of think about placing a pencil between my shoulder blades? Riders that are sitting up, but that don't have a lot of external rotation of the shoulders, primarily internal rotation, will generally come across as a picture of horsemanship and just having a little less confidence. So even though they're really tall, even though their seat is pretty good, their base of support is pretty good, they just look a little drawn and a little less confident about where they're going. If that same rider stretches tall, rolls those shoulders down back, it can bring their vision, their neck, their ear, everything up and back, and it's going to help them create that confidence plus presentation.
Can you show what it looks like when you're pulling too far back with the shoulders, asking for too much? And
when we start to draw too far back, we also unfortunately draw our hands back to our belly button. So when we think about coming too far back, yes, our shoulders are more up, our face is more up, but oftentimes we'll actually start to tip forward because we're not using our back and our glutes to create that engagement. We're just pulling, and so anything that pulls has to have a
equal and opposite reaction?
Every action has a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are getting too far back here, you're going to find yourself leaning forward, trying to find that balance point. It's about doing what you can do to stay balanced and strong and not ride above the means of your strength and your stability.
So then in a similar fashion with the shoulders, the other thing that is super common is that the shoulders are too far up, creeping up towards our ears. And again, kind of the same thing that Savannah mentioned with the shoulders being too rounded forward. It just creates a look that says, I'm not as confident as I could be. So when our shoulders get pulled too far up, it's because our neck muscles, our traps, are pulling up, okay? So if you're getting your shoulders too far up and your trainer's constantly saying put your shoulders down, you need to work on strengthening your mid-back muscles between your shoulder blades to pull down, okay? Because if you pull too far down without the strength in your upper back to do it, if you just ask your shoulders to pull down and not your back, you're going to create tension up in the neck and you're going to look really stiff through your neck. When your neck is too stiff, you're going to get stiff through your entire spine. And the stiffer you are through your spine, yes, it might create a journal horsemanship look, but your horse is not going to want to neck to do it. So then the last body part that we're going to talk about is our arms. Okay, so the bicep muscles are responsible for bending our elbows and bringing our hands up. And then the tricep muscles are responsible for pushing the arm down, okay? So if your trainer is constantly telling you that you're riding with your hands too far up, likely you're also crawling into the fetal position and you're probably also going to be falling forward with your upper body, okay? So again, this just creates a look of uncomfortableness. You're not engaged through the glutes, you're too engaged through the abs, through the hip flexors, your legs are probably going to be too far forward. You're engaging too much of the front side of your body, okay? And you need to engage more of the back side of your body or your posterior intake, okay? So if you feel like you're riding up like this, up in your boobs, okay, you probably need to engage your back, engage your glutes, engage your hamstrings to pull you back, but you also need to engage these tricep muscles to bring those hands down, okay? So for the horsemanship, we want our bicep muscles engaged to hold that strong position. I actually find that when I engage more of the bicep and less of the upper back and the shoulder to hold myself in a horsemanship position, it allows me to be more fluid with my horse and stay connected without getting too rigid. If I focus on staying too strong in my upper body through my shoulders, I'm going to get more rigid and I'm not going to connect to my own spine into my horse's spine as well. So I find that if I get really good bicep connection without too much, because then if I get too much, one, I'm going to pull my horse's head up too much, and it's probably going to I'm going to pull myself forward to my horses. So Savannah's going to show when we have too much bicep engagement, and that's going to pull our horse's head up to us and the horse's chin in too much. And it's going to create, like I said, it's going to pull her further forward. What do you feel when you're riding like that?
I feel that my horse is kind of riding behind the bridle instead of dropping from the withers and connecting.
Okay.
And I feel that it's changed the balance of my pelvis.
Okay. So then what if you have too much tricep engagement and your hands are too low? Which is also a common thing to see.
It is common. A lot of times I'll see riders doing this when they're really thinking about the mechanics of how their horse is doing elements and not so much their connection. It tends to be a position that riders get in when they're thinking too much about the overall picture and not enough about their positioning. But when you start to drop one hand, you're almost always going to start to drop the corresponding shoulder in that direction. And the less level and square you ride, the more your horse has to compensate in order to be able to complete the maneuver. So if you find that your horse is always leaning one direction, I almost guarantee it's because you're counter-leaning the opposite direction.
How often do you recommend actually practicing a horsemanship position? Do you recommend that riders do that every time they go to ride?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that if you're intending to be competitive in that event, you need to make sure that you are having a good balance of time between learning how to school your horse and keep them accountable for their maneuvers, but also understanding that your position greatly affects that. So anytime you're schooling those maneuvers and you find yourself slipping into horse trainer mode a little bit too much, you're going to lose your strength and stability that actually helps the animal complete the task that you're asking for. Not necessarily every single moment of every single ride, but it should definitely be a core value of your rides. I mean, I think that we see trends come and go in our industry, sometimes at a rapid rate. And a lot of those trends are based on analyzing as a group what we are seeing exhibitors do well and where we are seeing exhibitors create their own weaknesses. And so really the horsemanship has evolved to such a high standard that I feel that now we're seeing riders trend a little bit away from a stiff, rigid position and more to a connected position. And a lot of that has to do with the degree of difficulty that we're seeing in our patterns now. We have a lot of extended gaits. We have a lot of variations between those gaits. We have a lot of turns. Everything is happening fluid and with a lot of rhythm. And you simply cannot perform that well if you are too rigid or unstable.
Very well said. Thank you for listening to the Elevate Your Ride podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, follow us on social media, or leave a positive review. Please note, the views, ideas, and education shared on this podcast are intended for general education, and you should always consult with your team before making any big changes.